Deep in a valley shrouded in the mist of dawn, lies a small village forgotten by time. The surrounding hills, covered with thick forests, seem to protect this place from the outside world, keeping it away from the ups and downs of history. It is a town where life passes slowly, and the days mingle with the nights in an unchanging cycle, until one day, a stranger crosses its borders. This man, known only as Kaleth, arrives in town with the gait of someone who has walked long distances. His dark, disheveled hair contrasts with the pallor of his skin, and his eyes, deep and stormy, tell stories that few would dare to hear. No one knows where he comes from or what he seeks, but his very presence arouses the curiosity and suspicion of the inhabitants. Kaleth heads straight for the local tavern, a place where villagers gather at the end of their days to share stories and forget their worries. The innkeeper, a sturdy man named Arlen, watches the stranger with an interest that he tries to hide behind a facade of indifference. It is not common for strangers to arrive at his door, let alone linger. Kaleth takes a seat in a dark corner of the tavern, asking for a glass of wine and a moment of quiet. However, quiet is a hard thing to find in a town where rumors fly faster than the wind. Soon, furtive glances and whispers begin to converge on the mysterious traveler. The villagers, hungry for novelty in their monotonous existence, approach, intrigued by the story this man might tell. As the night progresses, and the cups empty, the pressure on Kaleth grows. Expectant eyes surround him, and the questions, initially subtle, become increasingly direct. Finally, after a long pause, Kaleth looks up, surveying the curious faces around him. In a voice that seems laden with all the secrets of the world, he begins to speak, unpacking the story of his life, a story that took him from the confines of innocence to the dark abysses of power and vengeance. And so, in that tavern lost in the middle of nowhere, where the fire crackles in the fireplace and the wind howls outside the windows, the legend of Kaleth, the silent wind, begins to take shape, trapping everyone present in a tale that will forever change the way they see the world. Don't miss out on the best. Subscribe now to my YouTube channel and join this amazing community. Every week, new adventures, tips, and much more await you. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell to stay always up to date. Let's start with the story. In a small village, hidden among tree-covered hills and shrouded in the mist of dawn, a solitary man arrives. This man, known as Kaleth, is a traveler with a past wrapped in mystery. No one in the village knows where he comes from or what he seeks, but his presence soon attracts the attention of the locals, especially that of the innkeeper, Arlen. Kaleth, with his dark hair and eyes that reflect the storms of his life, seeks refuge in the local tavern. There, among cups of wine and whispers, word begins to spread that this man is not a mere traveler, but someone with a story worth telling. The villagers, curious and hungry for stories, gather around Kaleth, persuading him to share his past. After a long pause, and with a gaze that suggests more than it says, Kaleth begins to recount his life, a life that begins in a place very different from the peaceful village. Kaleth starts his tale in his childhood, when he traveled with a troupe of artists and musicians who roamed the world. His family, nomadic and free, made their living by telling stories and singing songs in the towns and cities they passed through. From a very young age, Kaleth showed an innate talent for music, particularly for the lute, and an insatiable curiosity for ancient stories and the secrets of the world. Life in the wagon was hard but filled with joy and love. However, Kaleth's happiness was cut short when one day, upon returning from a solitary excursion, he found his family murdered and his wagon destroyed. Alone and with no one to trust, Kaleth took his father's lute and vowed to discover who was responsible for the tragedy. Kaleth continues his story by recounting how, after his family's death, he wandered the world until he reached the city of Veros, known as the City of 1,000 Faces, a place full of bustling markets, dark alleys, and secrets hidden around every corner. Without money or resources, Kaleth lived on the streets, playing his lute to survive and learning to fend for himself in a hostile environment. In Veros, Kaleth began to hear rumors about a group of assassins known as the Silence, a name that resonated with the tragedy he had lived through. Determined, he decided that he must infiltrate this organization to discover if they were behind his family's murder. But to do so, he needed skills he did not yet possess. In his search for knowledge, Kaleth crossed paths with an old man named Master Turin, a solitary man who lived in the mountains outside the city. Turin was known as a master of the winds, someone who could control the elements with his voice and music. Fascinated by this man's power, Kaleth begged Turin to accept him as an apprentice. Turin, initially reluctant, saw in Kaleth a determined spirit and a curious mind, qualities he himself had possessed in his youth. Thus, he accepted Kaleth as a disciple, teaching him to manipulate the winds and control his music in a way no other mortal could. Under Turin's tutelage, Kaleth developed incredible talent but also learned that power came at a cost and that the secrets he sought could lead him to his own downfall. After years of training, Kaleth left his master and returned to Veros with new skills. There, with his music and his ability to control the winds, he began to attract the attention of the city's dark powers. His goal was clear: to infiltrate the Silence and discover the truth behind his family's death. Kaleth earned the trust of the organization's leaders, proving to be a valuable member. As he rose through the ranks of the Silence, he began to realize that the group was involved in a conspiracy far greater than he had imagined, one that involved the nobility, the magical academies, and even the ancient gods. In his search for answers, Kaleth discovered the existence of an ancient king known as Rael, the Silent Wind, a monarch who had mysteriously disappeared centuries ago, leaving behind a legacy of chaos and destruction. Rumors said that Rael had possessed a power that allowed him to control not only the wind but also life and death. Kaleth began to investigate the legend of Rael, convinced that this ancient king had some connection to the Silence and the death of his family. His search led him to discover that Rael's power was not limited to legend, but was very real and was being sought by those who wished to use it for their own ends. As Kaleth delved deeper into the conspiracy, he realized that someone within the Silence was betraying him. An old friend, Lorien, with whom he had shared his hopes and dreams, turned out to be a double agent working for a rival faction. Lorien's betrayal hit Kaleth hard, but it also drove him to continue, knowing that the truth was getting closer. Lorien, however, was not an easy enemy to defeat. With his own resources and knowledge, he began to sabotage Kaleth's efforts, sowing distrust and chaos within the Silence. Kaleth had to face the bitter reality that to survive and fulfill his mission, he would have to be as ruthless as his enemies. The tension between Kaleth and Lorien finally erupted in a deadly confrontation during an epic storm atop an ancient tower. Using all his skills and the power he had learned from Master Turin, Kaleth unleashed a torrent of wind and lightning against Lorien, but Lorien also possessed dark powers that made him a formidable adversary. The duel was intense and brutal, with both fighters pushed to the limit of their abilities. In the end, Kaleth managed to defeat Lorien, but not without suffering grave wounds and losing a part of himself in the process. With Lorien's death, Kaleth was left alone, facing the consequences of his quest for vengeance. With Lorien dead and the Silence in disarray, Kaleth finally discovered the truth he had been seeking. His family had not been murdered by the Silence, but by a hidden cult within the organization, which was obsessed with the power of Rael, the Silent Wind. The cult had believed that Kaleth's family possessed ancient knowledge that would bring them closer to Rael's power, and they had killed to protect that secret. Kaleth, devastated by the revelation, decided that the knowledge and power that the silence and the cult had sought should not fall into mortal hands. With his music and his control over the winds, he sealed Rael's power in a place known only to him, ensuring that it could never be used to cause harm again. With his mission accomplished, Kaleth left Varos, knowing that his place was not in the city or among common people. He became a legendary figure, the man who had defied the silence and survived. But in his heart, Kaleth knew that he would never find the peace he had sought. Returning to his life as a traveler, Kaleth wandered the world, telling his story only to those who deserved to hear it. As the years passed, his legend grew, and the name of Kaleth, the Silent Wind, became synonymous with mystery and power. But for him, only the echo of thunder and the whisper of the wind remained, always accompanying him, reminding him of what he had lost and what he had sacrificed. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and comment.